Well, hello, good evening, and welcome to Suburban Homesteader, Wyoming, Arizona. This is Sandy, and have you ever said to yourself, "Oh, I'd love a homestead, but I don't have any land"? Well, this live stream is directly for you because you don't necessarily have to have acreages to be a homesteader. And you can homestead not with quote unquote a lot of land, but with intention. And we're going to talk about that tonight. It's it's going to be a fun topic. So if you're listening or in the chat tonight, let me know where you live. Also, if you own a homestead, do you live in the suburbs and you just have land, a yard, a backyard, front yard? Do you live in an apartment? And I can gear this live stream towards you guys in the chat. And Cheryl is here. Good evening. Julie, good evening. Fun, fun, fun. So many people in our economic world think that they have to have acreage to be a homesteader. But honestly, you can homestead anywhere as long as you do it with intention. That even if you had a balcony, even if you just had a little patio, 10 by 10 patio, could you homestead? You could. And that's what we're going to talk about, because you don't necessarily have to have a garden space, because you could do it in pots. If you lived in an apartment, you wanted to homestead, you could have pots inside and outside. You could have hydroponics. You could do the things that other homesteaders do. Cooking, canning, making things from scratch, making your own soaps, just 100 million different things that you can accomplish in just an apartment or a suburban backyard. Sometimes it's more than what people that have acreage actually do. It's surprising. Now, I live in a suburban homestead, both in Wyoming and in Arizona. And why do I call my places homesteads? Because I do it with intention. My goal is to be as self-sufficient, self-reliant, and resilient as possible. Julie says, I am in the suburbs. I have a yard, but most of my garden is in pots. I do want to put in beds in the backyard. See, there can be combinations. You can have a garden in ground. You can have them in raised beds. Some people use like horse troughs. Other people use pots. Some people think vertically and they grow things up because they are limited with space. So there's just so many different ways to be a homesteader. Now, maybe you have a suburban backyard. Depending on where you live, you may or may not be able to have chickens, may or may not be able to have rabbits, bees. Usually you can have garden spaces. Even with HOAs, you can usually have some kind of gardening, even if they restrict you to having pots. But have you thought about having quail? Quail is a small bird. It's prolific when it comes to laying. You can eat them, and they make very little noise. And so a lot of times you can do quail where you couldn't do chickens, or sometimes a city lets you do chickens, but your neighbors don't want you to have chickens. And so a quail can be a really good compromise. Legally, yes, for small animals. The coyotes may have other opinions. Well, you do have to think about predators. From coyotes to fox, skunks, raccoons. These things are things to consider on an acreage or in town on a homestead. Like I've had bees many, many times throughout my life. Some places will let you have them. Some places will not let you have them. You just have to know. Even in the smallest yards, you can have fruit trees or berries. Um, there's towers that you can grow just a ton of strawberries in. A lot of dwarf fruit trees will grow in pots too, from apples to peaches to lemons to any kind of citrus, depending on where you live in the United States. Oh, and Julie says, my neighbor has bees. When you are a beekeeper or you live by somebody with bees, your vegetables, you will have so many more vegetables. It is just unreal the amount, because of that close pollination, and the bees are just there. Now I understand some people are afraid of bees, some people are allergic to bees. These are things to consider. You could have fruit trees along your fences. You could just have berry bushes. What kind of things do your family love to eat? Now, there are fruit trees that have multiple different types of, like, you can get an apple tree that has, just from a box store, that has like 5 different kinds of apples on it. So there's a lot of possibilities for you. I think that sometimes we limit ourselves because, oh, I only have a backyard, or I only have a balcony, I only have a little patio. But the funny thing is that when you really break it down, how much land do we really use? I've seen this over and over again, that people have all this land and 3/4 of it they're not even actually using. So if you can homestead with intention, no matter what size you have, it can really make a difference. What flowers will draw honeybees? We have a problem with pollinators last year. There's a lot of them that will draw honeybees in. Bright colored flowers really like it. Sunflowers, bees really like. I'm trying to think of ones that they don't like. Like a honeybee does not pollinate a tomato. It doesn't pollinate a pepper. The wind does that, or you vibrate a tomato or pepper flower, and that's what pollinates. That they have male and female in the same flower, drops down 1/4 of an inch, and it pollinates itself. But really, any bright colors, they will come to a lot of different zinnias, to daisies. They will like bumblebees love snapdragons, which is really funny to me because they literally have to go inside there and then they come back out. But any bright colored flowers, they're gonna just really be drawn to. Hummingbirds, if you want them in your yard, they're drawn to red flowers. But I think the key to bringing honeybees in, because there's lots of wild honeybee colonies, is having diversity of different types of flowers, different types that go from one to another to another. They do. Bees love dill, funnel. They love lots of different herbs. Salvias, like when my salvias start to send that stalk of flowers up, it is just like a fest of bees everywhere. Our squash plant would flower but not produce. Okay, on a squash plant, there is male flowers and female flowers. Usually when it very first starts, it's mostly male flowers. And then it takes it a little bit, and then pretty soon they're producing both kinds of flowers. So you literally can go out in the morning, pick a male flower, peel down those petals, and then rub that center onto all your female flowers to pollinate. If there's not enough bees around, or like honeybees need a little more warmth than a bumblebee does. A bumblebee will come out when it's much cooler in the morning, and where a honeybee is going to wait till it warms up a little bit. And so if you have a lot of days of cool, you see a lot less honeybees. So that sometimes you just have to hand pollinate them yourself. In a pinch, just so you know, in a pinch, you can literally take a male flower from a pumpkin, a different kind of squash, a zucchini, and pollinate those squash flowers. Now, I wouldn't save the seeds for them because it's not going to be the same kind of plant. Probably be some weird funky thing, which could be fun. But you can hand pollinate them, and you can pollinate them, as soon as that female flower is open in the morning. And that should really fix it, Susan. Any size homestead, you could have a compost bin, so they're not wasting anything that you're not using. And if you don't have any animals that you can feed that to, like chickens or rabbits, you can make that into compost. You could have a worm bin, and it would feed all of that stuff that you would have thrown in the trash. Now, I never put in my compost bin, I never put fats, meats, and any disease plants. I didn't put any disease plants in there. Now, could you? You could. It would compost down. But you do have the thing that it can bring critters, mice, rats, vermin, any kind of vermin. It can bring those to your compost pile, and that's probably not something you want. But I have seen big productions where they literally put the whole, all the bone parts of animals, like turkeys, into that after they've, all the feathers are going in there, all the inside gut stuff is going in there. So if you have a big enough scale of composting, which most people, if they're having a backyard garden, suburban homestead, aren't going to have that. Now, other things that to be a homesteader. Do you have a pantry? You're growing all those vegetables. What are you going to do with them? Are you going to freeze some? Are you going to dehydrate some? Are you going to can some? What are you going to do with those things? So having a stocked pantry so that it feeds you when you don't have gardens is always, I think, always a wise thing to do. How much do you cook from scratch? Not that a homesteader always has to eat from scratch. They don't. They can go out to dinner. There's nothing. Sometimes we put all these rules on, quote unquote, this is a homesteader. You need to be deprived. You need to be some kind of lower class person. Use the technology that we have. Use all the things that we have to make the best homestead that you can do. Most backyards, for most cities, they'll let you have 5 to 6 hens, which means you could probably have 15 quails, because quails can be in such a small space. And I mean, but they have fertilizer just like, droppings just like a chicken does, that can really help your gardens, or that you can just add to your regular compost pile. And they're cute as can be. I had quail in my greenhouse one year, and that was kind of fun. They could run all over the place, and where a chicken might eat most of a plant, the quails never do that. But don't compare yourself, your suburban homestead or your apartment homestead, to someone that has acreage. It's so easy when we look at all the different YouTube channels and people have 40 acres and 160 acres, or just enormous homesteads. They have all these resources, and you can't compare yourself. You want to do what's good for you, that is good for your family. How many herbs are you growing this year? You can grow herbs not only in the summertime. You can grow them in pots and then bring them inside. Or you can start herbs inside. You could literally buy bundles of basil and oregano from the store and root them in water and then plant them. You could actually put some rooting hormone and just plant them in some soil, put a bag around them for a while till so it holds that humidity in there. And you could have your own herb garden. That would be absolutely fabulous. Becky at Acre Homestead with her 20 double-sized beds, one 8x4 would feed me. See, that's what you got to look at. Now, would I love having an acreage? I would, but that just doesn't seem to be in the cards for me. Joe doesn't want to live on a farm, and I don't know. It's there was a time in my life that I had the opportunity to buy 40 acres, and I was a single mom at the time, and I can't even tell you how many times I regret that I didn't do it. It was there was there was a line that went to the sink. It was my grandmother's farm. There was no indoor plumbing. The kids were small. I just didn't know if I could do it, and I backed out of it after I told my dad I would buy it, and then I just said I just couldn't do it. I was afraid I wouldn't be able to do it. I've regretted that my entire life. But obviously it wasn't for me at that time. So, you just have to do what's best for you. Now, when you have a suburban homesteader, there are some advantages. One, you can walk around your whole homestead in a small amount of time. You can pick the jobs that are really relevant for your homestead. Sometimes the more land you get, the more things you think you have to try, that you think you have to do, but you don't. Just be okay with, I don't have to do that. You can just build year after year what you want to add until it becomes this perfect homestead for you and your family. It could be 2 raised beds. It could be 10 raised beds. How many fruit trees can you put on your property? Well, that's up to you. And are you going to eat them all? You're going to make applesauce. You're going to make jelly. You're going to make apple juice. Are you going to give a lot of them away? I give lots of them away. I mean, the bags of apples I gave away this year to my whole neighborhood, it was just like ridiculous. And the kids got some over in Rapid City, and it was just, and I thought, gosh, in 10 years, when my apples are producing even more, it's going to have so many apples. I don't know what I'm going to do with them. But I am longing for that day. I am very excited about that day. This is an honest statistic. Many suburban homesteaders outperform large productions because they are focused. And what does that mean? It means that they are doing a homestead with intention. They are focused on this area. Say you got a 10 by 10 space. Are you using that whole area to its potential? Maybe you have I have a large lot. It's about a third of an acre. And even with all my fruit trees and berries and gardens, there are still areas that I'm not using them to my full potential. So it's a process that I will keep doing. It can be a lot of work, but you could make it as much work as you want it to be. I need to take lemons to work. Must have 20 ripening all at once. I can understand that because I juiced Ponderosa lemons last week, and I had 5 half gallons and 3 half gallons of lime juice, and I still have lemons on my tree. I have lemons on my tree that are still green because a citrus will bloom at different times. So you can have flowers and fruit that are ripe and fruit that aren't ripe all at the same time on a citrus. It's really pretty amazing. And where we live, there's a lot of people with citrus. And so people are always giving them away. And I have tried waiting for a long time just before we leave, um, and just taking them back whole. But those ponderosa lemons, if you wait too long, they want to sprout inside, and then it turns a little bit bitter. And it's not like you can't make stuff with it. It's just not the same, quite the same taste. So if you decide to have raised beds, we'll just take that for example. So say you have 4 raised beds. You can decide and you can rotate. It's very easy to keep track of what you planted from year to year, how you've moved it from one bed to another bed. And at the end of the beds, you can have great big pots. You could have containers. You could have containers with herbs or flowers or fruit trees on the ends of each bed. Are you using everything, every inch that you have to a potential? Now, I always have a section in my yard that I call it the wild section. I seriously, I don't cut the grass there. I let the grass or weeds or whatever wants to come up right there. I let it. Now, if it was a thistle coming up and it was going to flower, I would cut the flower off. But I can move that section to different parts of my yard in different years, because insects absolutely love having an area like that they can, it's a habitat for them. So I have this one section that it's always that way. But then I have other sections that I move from one place to another, especially if I'm trying to let that soil rest or improve that soil in some way. Because just because weeds are growing there, they can pull so many good nutrients deep down from the soil to the surface. And so it can be really interesting that way. But homesteading in small spaces it's not only possible, it can be a place that really thrives. It can be productive. It can be, actually, you can really be creative, I think. And so it's very cool. It says, hi, cousins. My amaryllises have 4 blooms. Oh, spectacular. I had 2 amaryllises that already bloomed. They were just beautiful. And then the other ones, they haven't got, the flower is coming up, but I moved all of them outside and planted them in the ground. And I planted it in an area that it's warm, but it doesn't actually get sun. And amaryllises can grow in the sun in ground. But like if you grow them in your house, you're probably better to have them more indirect light. Though, honestly, I have put them on a windowsill and grown them too. But aren't they spectacular? They're just like so fabulous. I honestly, it's one of the most amazing flowers ever. I mean, seriously. And most of the time you can get your amaryllises to bloom twice a year. I did have a gal that said that she could get them to bloom 3 times a year. I've tried that, but it seems that I can get them to send leaves up, but I can't usually get them to send the flower stalk up more than twice a year. But one of the great things about a suburban homestead area is the herbs that you can grow. And they can be herbs that you cook with or herbs that are good for medicine. And that's really amazing to me, that because you can just tuck them everywhere. You can have them in pots. You can have them on windowsills. You can put them in your garden in between different plants. And it's just amazing. Like if I'm having problems with my, say I'm having aphid problems, I am going to plant onions there or garlic or shallots or garlic chives, something, because aphids do not like alliums. And it can be really a good deterrent so that they move someplace else. My amaryllis is in a pot indoors. We're supposed to get into the 50s for highs next week. When can I transplant it outside? Um, don't transplant it outside until after your last frost date. And so you can, like, I'm down in Arizona right now, so I'm not in Wyoming. I couldn't plant them outside right now in Wyoming. But the amaryllis that I move back and forth, they're basically out in pots all summer long, and then I bring them down here. But this year I decided I would plant them in the dirt because even in the summertime, the place that I planted them, they're in shade. Now it will get hot, but it does have a water source, and so I'm just going to see if it will work. Um, Rudy is in here. Rudy, I don't think Lazy Days is in here. So, things that you can do inside. You could do sprouts. You could do microgreens. In fact, here's some microgreens. I really should have cut them about 3 days ago, but I knew I was having this live and I wanted to show them to you. This was just my mixture. It has different kinds. It has radishes and kales and different things in here. But I'm going to make a salad tomorrow. And I would have had a salad the other day, but I thought, oh no, I'm going to show it on my live. But this is just a little container. It just has perlite in it. No soil. And I just sprinkled the red on top. I covered it so it was dark so that they would germinate. But once they started germinating, I took that off, and they literally weren't in the sun. I actually had them next to my on my coffee table where there's a lamp, and I just turned the lamp on during the day, and that incandescent light, because it's not an LED in there, it just lets them grow fine. So it's an easy thing to do. But you could have, so you could sprout, you could make microgreens, you could have your herbs inside. Do you guys, who makes bread here? Not that every homesteader has to make bread. I'm not saying that. But it's such a phenomenal way of expressing you being a homesteader. And I know there's a lot of people that use a bread machine. And I had a bread machine for a long time, and I never hardly used it. I guess because I missed that kneading process that I was doing myself. And I mean, it was very kind. I got it for a gift, but I ended up giving it to one of my daughters. Julie says, I make my bread. It's too expensive these days. You know, I was at a market the other day, and the sourdough bread, just regular loaf. I mean, it was homemade. It was a sourdough loaf. They wanted $13 for that loaf of bread. I can make that for a lot less money than that. I just thought, how can you charge $13? I know how much it costs to make this. Can you see me now? I don't know what was happening. And now it has me in 2 different places. And when I try to go one, I disappear. So I guess I'm staying at 2. Moves. There I go. That was so weird. On my screen, it said low internet. Oh, that was crazy. Okay. I used a stand mixer to get it halfway, then I need it for 5 minutes. I usually just have the one of my big bowls, and I mix it with with my stirrer, and then when it gets too thick, then I mix it with my hands. I just love that feel of doing homemade bread. It's just a thing that I love. Um, why does a baker always look for a better job? He needs the dough. That is awesome. Farmers markets charge that price for sourdough bread because they use organic flour. It did not say organic flour on her label. Now, I'm sure that's true with some people, and so they're charging more money. But you would think that if they were using organic flour on her list of ingredients, it would have said that. Am I frozen again? Let me know, because it doesn't look on my end that I'm frozen. So weird. But I hope I know I'm past my 30 minutes. But think of how no matter what size space you have, how small your area is, you can still homestead. You can homestead inside and outside. And if you do that with intention, if you do that, you can really, oh, good, you can hear me. You can really fulfill a lot of dreams that you thought you couldn't do. And maybe at some point in your life, you will have more acres. You'll be able to do that. But if you don't, I hope you're satisfied, if you're happy with all that you do. Now, I guess I'm going to have to let you go because I'm past my 30 minutes. But in the chat, or if you watch this later, tell me where you are, if you homestead in the city, and maybe a trick or two that could help other people. And that way you can share your knowledge with other people that have dreamed to be a homesteader, and maybe right now they can just be a suburban homesteader, that they just have that small area, or they have an apartment and they're doing everything on their balcony or inside. Support those people around you, help them, give them encouragement. And I hope you guys have a great day. And Troy's son is just coming in as we're leaving. Hi, Troy. So I'm going to let you go. No matter what space you have, no matter where you are in your life right now, you can be a homesteader. I will see you next time.